I'd say Fooly Cooly is the single most influential anime ever made. Like the entire industry can be split into before Fooly and after Cooly. But what if it wasn't an anime? What if the Mona Lisa of animation was a picture book? That's probably a question not a lot of people know the answer to, since I had never even heard of a Fooly Cooly manga before stumbling across it in a bookstore. It felt like a relic from another dimension, something that shouldn't exist, something that will haunt my bloodline for generations. So I bought it, of course. Was it good? Well, we'll get to that. I gotta pad the runtime first, you know. Naota's a young boy living in the middle of nowhere. Nothing ever happens there, and every day is the same. Just trying to fill the shoes of his big brother who moved to America. That's until a maniac hits him with her guitar and makes a robot pop out of his forehead. Now, every day is still boring, but there's a bunch of bullshit to deal with on the side. It's a show about a lot of things. One could go so far to say it's a show about everything. Fooly Cooly is also the one story that's impossible for me to analyze. Writing this script was so difficult. The most common point of praise for it is its animation. A lesser anituber than yours truly would go into some spiel about how it was before its time and anime has fallen off, but even though I like to call myself dumb, I'm not stupid. Fooly Cooly is a product of their times and could not have been made outside of the time frame that was 1999 through the year 2000 for a multitude of reasons. People like to pretend that 2D animation works like 3D, where all their stuff was held back by software and hardware, but it isn't like that. What ultimately determines how a 2D animation looks is the skill of the animator and the freedom they were granted. And both those things Fooly Cooly had in spades. How is this relevant to a video about its manga? Well, how the anime looks and moves is a huge part of why it's remembered so fondly. It's kinda the cult classic anime. I'm too lazy to look up actual numbers, but if I remember correctly, Fooly Cooly didn't do too well financially initially. It picked up steam much later, when people started getting nostalgic over this weird little thing. And at that point the studio pumped out a boatload of shitty sequels that didn't capture the original's tone or message and ruined most of the goodwill the series had in the public eye. I can't say too much about those, I haven't seen them and most likely never will. I got better stuff to do than watch abysmal dog shit. Why exactly is this thing so beloved? It's just a 6-episode miniseries from the year 2000. Well, that's because it's so unique. 25 years have passed since it came out, and nothing has quite captured its vibe. It's both ethereal and grungy, sad and funny, the visual direction and the soundtrack mixed together into something that's so very cool. Fooly Cooly is everything. The short length also plays a part in its success. It's infinitely rewatchable, and with each viewing you realize something new about it. It's a show that I at least can never figure out. My brain kinda melts whenever I try. Despite all of that, it's far from my favorite anime, but I constantly think about it. For Fooly Cooly to be your favorite, you must have seen it air on Toonami or something in the 2000s as a kid. I didn't start watching anime until 2020, so I missed that window by a bit. That may seem like an incredibly arbitrary requirement for it to be someone's favorite, but from what I've seen, that's the story for most people. How do I know that? Fooly Cooly inspired everything I love. Now, the most obvious thing that Fooly Cooly spawned is Studio Trigger. I mean, look at it. If I remember correctly, a lot of the team at Gainax that made this went on to create Gurren Lagann, which is what led to the birth of Trigger. But everything from the character writing to the animation to the story progression is characteristic of a Trigger anime. Like when I first watched it, I was convinced it was one. It was way later I learned that I was sorely mistaken. You know I always have to find a way to talk about Chainsaw Man, no matter what the video is about, but this time I have a semi-legitimate reason. Fujimoto stated himself that FLCL is a key inspiration for CSM. Boy has to deal with weapons popping out of his head and is manipulated through lust by an otherworldly woman who never really sees him, only the nuclear weapon in his skull. She loves the bomb, but it couldn't give less of a shit about her. Also other minor stuff. Eyebrows is a pretty clear inspiration for Sideburns, which I forgot about in my video about him, because I'm stupid. Now another pretty obvious comparison you could make is with Persona 4, my favorite game of all time. Supernatural powers in a small rural Japanese town covered in fog and everything's extremely yellow. Yeah. Chainsaw Man takes more things from Fooly Cooly on a thematic level, while Persona robs it blind on a visual one. I just think that's neat. Time for the more niche shit that I'm contractually obligated to mention. Exociety, my favorite collection of artists, wouldn't exist without this show. Probably. Kill Bill the Rapper sampled so many lines from Fooly Cooly, and all of their music is reminiscent of this series' vibe. Okay, time's up, can't talk longer than that about them, I don't wanna kill my retention completely. The series is also one of the earliest examples of the manic pixie dream girl trope. It predates the actual coining of the term, but like, Haruko is pretty much the textbook example of it. Or not really, she's probably a bit too evil and mean for it, but she checks almost every box. Just fun trivia to know. Basically, anything with a twinge of quirk released in the past 25 years, you can make a solid case claiming it has Fooly Cooly-isms. Scott Pilgrim is probably the most obvious example, but I don't wanna bore you to death. Now you should have a solid grasp on just how massive Fooly Cooly's place in the world actually is. And I've padded the video enough, so let's get into the manga. Is what I would say if there wasn't some background on this book I need to get into. This is everyone's favorite part of any video essay, if you can even call it this that, where I just regurgitate facts from Wikipedia. But it's kinda important to get a grasp of the background behind this thing before actually talking about it. So why exactly was this manga made?
Money!
Yeah, this shit wasn't anything more than a cash grab. Like how every movie gets a novel adaptation in the West, most original anime get a manga adaptation to match. Why finding this thing in particular was so surprising to me though, was because in my head, Fooly Cooly wasn't successful enough when it came out to warrant this, and the fact that the animation and music play such big parts in why the anime works. Anyhow, the author behind this is Hajime Ueda, who had never made a manga before this. Since then he has only created one other one, Kyuko-chan? I've never heard of it. Or I guess he also drew but didn't write Jagged Tiger? Never heard of it either. Also, he did some doujinshis apparently. He's mainly an animator and designer, most well known for making some openings and endings for problematic Digigatari media. Heartbreaking, I know. Hey look, he also made some illustrations for Madoka and March Comes In Like a Lion. That redeems him, probably, I don't know. Safe to say, I'd like more manga from him, because I thoroughly enjoyed my time with this funny little book. So, now it's time to dive into the statement I plastered on the thumbnail. How exactly is this thing different from the anime? I hadn't read any anime to manga adaptations before this, but from what I have remember hearing about stuff like the Evangelion manga, is that they usually keep in line with the source material and then go off the rails later on. So I expected it to diverge near the end, but no. After, Takun, what are you doing? Homework. Then why don't you do it at home? 'Cause that's not cool. It goes off the rails. At this point in the anime, Mamimi harasses Naota and then they go up to the bridge to get a drink, which is when Haruka appears. But in the manga, Naota gets drive-by by the river and dies. Haruko and Mamimi proceed to drag him away and bury him in an alley. He hallucinates Maid Haruko Kanti, wakes up, and then the robot fight happens, even if it doesn't really make sense here. It continues on like that. For the most part it's similar, but not the same. Or, well, later on there's some really major changes that I'm not gonna spoil. I would probably claim it's one of the strangest things I've ever read. I'd like to coin the term Schrödinger's competency to describe it. It's both well made and shit at the same time, in a sort of superposition kind of ordeal. Like the character writing is perfect, they nailed every single one and no one feels off. Almost. The only thing they forgot about is Naota's dad's quirk of constantly making references to shit. He still feels like the same person, but he just doesn't try to start a Family Guy cutaway gag every 5 seconds. Kanti basically has my favorite character design from anything ever, so his increased importance here is wonderful. Every time I watch Fooly Cooly, I realize how little he actually does, so I appreciate the manga putting heavier emphasis on his and Naota's relationship and how he's a surrogate for Naota's brother. Don't get me wrong, the anime also does this, but as I've said, my brain can't fully comprehend this series, so I need shit to be slightly more obvious. Another interesting thing it does is having Mamimi and Haruko interact more. A fascinating combination that the anime doesn't touch at all. At least I don't remember them having any real interactions. I guess that's kind of the point. We only really see Haruko from Naoto's perspective. She never really interacts with anyone without him present in the anime. And Mamimi's story in the original wouldn't work if she had anyone to interact with. The manga doesn't really care about that. So we get to see more combinations like this. Like, of course, the girl with a hole in her heart and the one who manipulates everyone around her are an interesting pairing. It's just that Naoto has no place in that story. Ninamori and Naoto's grandpa are also bigger characters. The anime obviously has a whole episode dedicated to Ninamori, but she's more recurring here. Like, instead of running away with Haruko, Naoto does so with Ninamori. She also manages to control her powers, so we get some team-ups between Naoto plus Kanti and her with a thingamabob. In the anime, Gramps doesn't do shit. He's just kinda there. The manga gives him a friend, a flashback and shit to do. Instead of Naoto's home run, the geezers play croquet, or that would be the closest comparison. It's not against the nuke, but one of the earlier robots. Anyway, that's a really ballsy change. The baseball episode is one of the most important in the show, but I think it spreads the baseball stuff well enough throughout the rest of the book. From a character perspective, it's maybe a bit weird that Naoto's willing to swing the bat by himself, but I don't really care. Overall, Gramps is more clearly portrayed as an older version of Naoto. I mean, just look at how he looked like as a kid. The rest of his character kinda just snapped into place when that revelation clicked. All of these characters' increased depth and relevance comes at a cost though. Eyebrows and his sidekick get 2 panels total. Is he important in the anime? Yes, like almost too important. But he's also a bit annoying, so I don't miss him that much. I think the fact that he never shuts up is why he got cut. But I'll get to why the manga thinks that's a problem in a sec. So overall, the character writing is great. Naoto still Naoto, Haruko is Haruko, and giving the sidecast more shit to do is neat. The problem is that this book made me wonder if I have brain damage. It made me illiterate. Most of the time I couldn't follow what was happening in the slightest. It's a bit like only getting the cliff notes of the story. Like if you hadn't seen the show before reading this, you would be completely screwed. Because the pacing here is insane. It makes a late-stage One Piece chapter look like a late-stage One Piece episode. Something unexplained is constantly happening, and you just have to accept it. Then again, maybe I'm just dumb and it's actually really easy to follow. That's always a possibility. I think it should have been like thrice as long. There's no way this was the original draft. It must have been slimmed down until only this remained. Because the ideas it presents are good, but it simply doesn't have the time to breathe. The beauty of Fooly Cooly is that it's both batshit and chill as hell. It's the culmination of the marriage between hype moments and aura, and themes and such. The manga understands this, but at the same time it doesn't let itself slow down to let either one simmer. It has moments that are meant to be calmer, but they never last, which is a damn shame. That's enough differences. Time to look a bit of what makes this foolish and coolish. Despite everything, it's still you. The story may be different, the events may happen out of order, and some characters are gone. But it's still Fooly Cooly. The core is still there. I was right calling it a relic from another dimension. This is Fooly Cooly, but it isn't Fooly Cooly. That's the best and kind of only way to describe it. It's a different story with the same characters, but the vibe is the same and it tastes the same. Speaking of taste, holy shit, I wanna eat this art style. Every page, every panel is so delectably scrumptious. The day I decide to lock in and actually make an attempt to learn to draw, I will study this tome extensively. There are artists with a certain art style that just speaks to me. Keiurana, Metaflex, Soyato, and this. I think my brain is telling me what I need to create, but I don't have time for all of that. I gotta make video essays that get 90 views. First off, I love the paneling. I love the amount of white space used, I love the rough look of the panels themselves, and I love how experimental it is with the placement. It just feels refreshing to read, you know? Okay, so this next one isn't really an exclusive issue with this manga, but just an observation I made since I don't read a lot of physical manga. I've only ever read this, Look Back, and Goodbye Eri like that. For my astute viewers, you may remember that I have a copy of Soloist in a Cage. I haven't even opened it. Yes, I just bought it as a prop. Yes, I'm not good with money. What I want to say is that the double spreads would probably be better in digital. You know how a book works, it curves towards the middle, and usually you want the focus point of the artwork to be centered, especially if it's action. A manga manuscript is of course drawn flatly, so the artist doesn't see a problem 9 times out of 10. However, this is how it looks in print. Kinda lacks sauce, right? Of course, this is far from the only manga that does this, but it's a useful benchmark to judge a mangaka skill by. I don't like JoJo's, but Araki is a fantastic artist. Just look at how he handled this problem. Not every double spread is like this, but it was annoying me while reading. Most of them didn't give the impression of awe they were supposed to, and instead just made me a bit peeved, since they weren't readable at all. This point is also supported by the fact that, in my opinion, none of the action scenes are all that great. Now, this is probably just because I mainly read battle shonen, and this is, well, not that. What is Fooly anyway? I guess it falls somewhere under the shonen umbrella. But this doesn't have prolonged action sequences. This ain't no Kagurabachi. Everything is just a brief, kinda illegible skirmish. It's in this regard it's most obvious that the mangaka wasn't used to making manga. It's very different making a fight scene in animation compared to in print. In animation you have the benefit of being able to show movement through time. That's the whole point of the medium. In a comic, you must instead portray the same motion through a limited amount of snapshots placed throughout space instead of time. It's incredibly tricky knowing what points in the movement to actually draw in order to enable the viewer to envision the full movement on their own, as well as it being enjoyable to do so. The manga succeeds with the latter, but not the former. It's fun to read, I just have no clue what's going on. Finally, I have to point out that there is an absurd amount of profile picture bait panels. Look through it yourself and you'll almost guaranteed find one that speaks to you. Also, another fun thing is that there is a shit ton of bonus art in this thing, which was really fun to look at. Lots of funky art styles, perfect for when I repurpose this thing into an art book. Overall, this was a really nice read. Love the art, love the characters. I just can't analyze it, because I have no clue what I just read. So there's not much else for me to say. By the way, I read this thing with the Fooly reanimated collab album playing in the background, and it was a healing experience. That thing is somehow one of my favorite releases of the year, and I'm not just saying it because it has a Melty Cannon track on it. There's also Boba Boys and Steppi. If you like FLCL, this is a fun novelty thing that I recommend you check out. The anime is of course still better, but this isn't bad by any means. If I didn't like it, I would have spoiled the shit out of it, but I want you to read it for yourself. It's like 360 pages, that's like 20 chapters of a weekly manga, and there isn't even that much text, so you don't have any excuse not to. In conclusion, maybe the real Foolies with the coolies we Fooly along the way. Since the Cayman video blew up again out of nowhere, I have long since passed my goal of 500 subs, and will now proceed to jump the gun. I have a Patreon now. I of course don't really expect anyone to join it, but it'll be there in the background. Want sneak peeks of upcoming videos, your name in the credits, early videos, influence what I make in the future, and behind the scenes information from previous projects? Go check it out. And follow me on Twitter. Everything's linked down below. Again, I doubt anyone will do it, but this hobby of mine has placed me in the red, and any dime will help. Okay, bye.